Maya Rodriguez, a dedicated but overlooked data analyst at a federal agency in Washington, D.C., discovers a critical pattern in cybersecurity threats that could prevent a major national attack. Despite her groundbreaking work being dismissed by colleagues and supervisors, her persistence leads to recognition at the highest level when her analysis saves countless lives, culminating in a personal meeting with the President of the United States. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune above Maya Rodriguez's cubicle on the third floor of the Herbert C. Hoover Federal Building. At 6:47 a.m., she was already 3 hours into what most people would consider their workday, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with the practiced rhythm of someone who had long ago made peace with solitude. Steam rose from her third cup of coffee, black, no sugar, as lines of code and data streams filled her dual monitors. Maya had been a senior data analyst for the Department of Homeland Security's Cyber Threat Analysis Division for 8 years, yet she remained as invisible to her colleagues as the threats she spent her days hunting. While others gathered around the water cooler, discussing weekend plans or the latest office gossip, Maya dove deeper into the digital shadows, where danger lurked in ones and zeros. The morning light struggled to penetrate the tinted windows of the government building, casting everything in a perpetual gray that matched Maya's mood most days. She adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and leaned closer to her screen, watching a cascade of network traffic data that would put most people to sleep within minutes. But to Maya, this was a symphony, each packet of information a note in a complex composition that only she seemed to hear. Still beating that dead horse, Rodriguez. The voice belonged to Derek Chen, her supervisor, who appeared at her cubicle entrance holding his designer coffee cup like a trophy. Derek was the kind of manager who took credit for other people's discoveries and blamed his team for his own oversights. His perfectly pressed shirt and ambitious smile had carried him up the bureaucratic ladder while analysts like Maya did the actual work. "It's not dead," Maya replied without looking up from her screen. "I'm seeing coordinated probing across 17 different federal networks. The attack vectors are subtle, but there's definitely a pattern." Derek leaned against her cubicle wall, his cologne competing with the building's recycled air. "Maya, we've been through this. The automated systems would have flagged anything significant. You're chasing shadows because you want there to be something there." Maya finally turned to face him, her dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of her monitors. "The automated systems are looking for known signatures. This is something new, adaptive, learning. It's not triggering the standard alarms because it's designed not to." "Look," Derek said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he reserved for what he considered Maya's episodes of overcautiousness. "I need you to focus on the quarterly threat assessment report. It's due to the director's office by Friday, and I can't have you distracted by conspiracy theories." Maya's jaw tightened. 8 years of proven instincts, of catching threats that others missed, and she was still treated like an overzealous intern. "This isn't a conspiracy theory, Derek. Give me 48 hours to map the full scope of what I'm seeing." 48 hours to waste government resources on a hunch? Derek shook his head. "The report, Maya. Focus on what matters." As Derek walked away, Maya turned back to her screens with renewed determination. She had learned long ago that being right wasn't enough in this building. You had to be right and loud, or better yet, right and male. But Maya wasn't built for office politics. She was built for patterns, for seeing connections that others missed. The data streams continued their relentless flow across her monitors. To an untrained eye, it looked like digital noise, random packets of information flowing through the vast network infrastructure that kept America's digital heart beating. But Maya saw something else. She saw patience. She saw intelligence. She saw coordination. Over the next several hours, as her colleagues filtered in with their morning commutes and coffee shop chatter, Maya constructed what she privately called her digital map. Using 3 different monitoring tools and her own custom algorithms, she began connecting dots that existed across time zones and network boundaries. The first connection appeared at 11:23 a.m. A series of seemingly random login attempts from different IP addresses but with timing intervals that were too precise to be coincidental. Maya's pulse quickened as she traced the digital breadcrumbs deeper into the government's network infrastructure. "Hey Maya, coming to lunch with us?" Sarah Kim from accounting stood at her cubicle with two other women Maya recognized, but had never really spoken to. They were kind enough, but Maya had learned that her lunch hour was often her most productive time. Fewer distractions, quieter networks, cleaner data. "Thanks, but I'm in the middle of something," Maya replied, offering a brief smile before returning to her work. She heard one of them whisper something about workaholic as they walked away, but Maya had stopped caring about such comments years ago. People saw dedication as obsession when it came from someone who didn't fit their social expectations. By 2 p.m., Maya had mapped what she believed to be a sophisticated, multi-vector cyber attack in its reconnaissance phase. The attackers were probing critical infrastructure networks, power grids, transportation systems, financial networks, with the methodical patience of professionals. Each probe was small enough to avoid detection, but together they painted a picture of preparation for something massive. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she compiled her findings. If she was right, this wasn't just another routine security threat. This was preparation for a coordinated attack that could cripple multiple critical systems simultaneously. The kind of attack that could cause nationwide chaos. She printed her preliminary analysis, 47 pages of network logs, connection maps, and threat assessments. The laser printer's mechanical whirring seemed unusually loud in the quiet afternoon office. As the pages emerged, Maya felt the weight of what she had discovered settling on her shoulders. Derek's office door was closed, but she could see him through the glass partition, laughing at something on his phone. Maya knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "I need you to look at this," she said, placing the thick stack of papers on his desk. Derek glanced at the papers, then at his watch. "Maya, I thought we discussed this. The quarterly report." "Forget the quarterly report," Maya interrupted, her voice carrying an urgency that made Derek finally look up. "This is bigger than anything we've seen before. They're mapping our critical infrastructure, Derek. Power, transportation, communications. They're preparing for a coordinated strike." Derek flipped through a few pages, his expression skeptical. "These are just network logs, Maya. Random connection attempts. This happens thousands of times a day. Not like this." Maya leaned forward, pointing to specific entries in her analysis. "Look at the timing, the target selection, the methodical progression. This isn't random, it's reconnaissance." "Even if you're right," Derek said, setting the papers aside, "this would be way above our pay grade. The NSA, FBI, they have teams specifically for this kind of threat assessment." Maya stared at him, realizing that her supervisor, the man responsible for evaluating cyber threats to national security, was more concerned about chain of command than potential catastrophe. "So you won't escalate this?" Derek's expression softened slightly as if he were speaking to a confused child. "Maya, you're a good analyst, but you're not seeing the bigger picture here. These agencies have protocols, automated systems, entire departments dedicated to exactly what you think you found. If this were real, they would have detected it already." As Maya walked back to her cubicle, carrying her dismissed analysis, she felt the familiar sting of being underestimated. But beneath that sting was something else. A growing certainty that she was right, and a determination to prove it, regardless of whether anyone was listening. The afternoon sun slanted through the office windows, casting long shadows across the government building's utilitarian carpet. Maya returned to her desk, her analysis still warm from the printer, and made a decision that would change everything. She was going to keep digging. Maya's desk lamp cast a warm glow over her keyboard as the office emptied around her. It was 8:30 p.m., and the cleaning crew had already made their rounds, leaving behind the faint scent of industrial disinfectant and the silence that only government buildings possessed after hours. The fluorescent overheads had switched to their energy-saving mode, bathing the cubicle farm in dim amber light that made everything look like an old photograph. She had spent the last 6 hours diving deeper into the data patterns she'd identified, following digital breadcrumbs that led through a maze of server logs, connection records, and network traffic analyses. Her custom monitoring software, a program she'd developed in her spare time, and never officially reported, was revealing connections that the standard DHS systems couldn't see. The coffee in her thermos had long gone cold, but Maya barely noticed. She was in what her college professors used to call the zone, that state of complete focus, where time became irrelevant and complex. Problems began to unravel like puzzles, designed specifically for her mind. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with surgical precision, querying databases and cross-referencing IP addresses with the methodical patience of someone who understood that the devil lived in the details. At 9:47 p.m., Maya found it. Hidden within what appeared to be routine maintenance traffic on the eastern seaboard power grid, she discovered a series of micro-intrusions that had been occurring every 72 hours for the past 6 weeks. Each intrusion lasted exactly 4.7 seconds, long enough to map system vulnerabilities, but short enough to avoid triggering standard security protocols. The attackers weren't trying to cause damage yet. They were creating a blueprint. Maya's heart began to race as she traced similar patterns across other critical infrastructure networks. Transportation control systems in major cities showed identical intrusion signatures. Financial network hubs displayed the same 72-hour intervals, the same 4.7-second duration windows. Communication satellites, water treatment facilities, emergency response networks, all bearing the fingerprints of the same coordinated reconnaissance operation. "My God," she whispered to the empty office, her voice barely audible above the building's humming ventilation system. Maya pulled up a secure terminal and began constructing what she would later call her digital doomsday map, a comprehensive visualization of how these mapped vulnerabilities could be exploited simultaneously. The picture that emerged made her stomach turn. If coordinated properly, these intrusions could trigger cascading failures across multiple critical systems. Power grids would fail, transportation networks would collapse, financial markets would crash, and emergency services would be crippled, all within the span of hours. She reached for her phone to call Derek, then remembered his dismissive attitude from earlier. Maya stared at the device, weighing her options. Going over Derek's head would be career suicide, but staying silent could mean something far worse. Maya decided to document everything first. She spent the next 2 hours creating a comprehensive threat assessment that read like a techno-thriller novel, except every word was backed by hard data: network logs, intrusion timestamps, vulnerability maps, potential impact analyses. She laid it all out with the precision of a federal prosecutor building a case. By midnight, Maya had produced a 127-page report that she titled Coordinated Infrastructure Reconnaissance, Analysis of Systematic Vulnerability Mapping Across Critical U.S. Networks. She encrypted the document with military-grade security and saved multiple copies on different secure servers. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Maya's mood as she sat in the parking garage of the federal building, staring at her phone. She had Derek's number pulled up, but her finger hovered over the call button. 8 years of being dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated had taught her that being right wasn't enough. Timing and presentation mattered just as much as accuracy. Maya entered the building through the security checkpoint, nodding to the guards who had grown accustomed to her early arrivals. The elevator carried her to the 3rd floor, where the familiar fluorescent hum welcomed her back to her cubicle fortress. Derek arrived at his usual 9:15 a.m., carrying his designer coffee and wearing the confident smile of someone who believed his biggest problem would be choosing which restaurant to visit for lunch. Maya watched him settle into his office before approaching with her encrypted tablet containing the previous night's discoveries. "Derek, I need 5 minutes," she said, standing in his doorway with an urgency that made him look up from his morning emails. "Maya, please tell me you haven't spent all night chasing that same phantom threat." "It's not phantom." Maya entered his office and closed the door behind her, something she had never done in 8 years. "I found the coordination protocol. They're mapping our critical infrastructure for a synchronized attack." Derek leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern as he registered the seriousness in Maya's voice. "Show me." Maya placed her tablet on his desk and began walking him through the data. For the first time since she had known him, Derek listened without interrupting. His coffee grew cold as Maya explained the 72-hour intervals, the 4.7-second intrusions, the systematic mapping of vulnerabilities across power grids, transportation networks, and financial systems. Derek paused, studying the data visualizations Maya had created. This is either the most sophisticated threat we've ever encountered, or you've connected dots that don't actually form a picture. The patterns are too precise to be coincidental, Maya insisted. Look at the timing correlations across different networks. This level of coordination requires significant resources and planning. Derek stood up and walked to his window, staring out at the Washington, D.C. skyline, as if searching for answers in the morning traffic below. If you're right about this, Maya, it's beyond our departmental scope. This would need to go directly to the director, possibly to the National Security Council. Then let's send it up the chain. Do you understand what you're asking? Derek turned back to face her. If we escalate this and you're wrong, both our careers are finished. But if we don't escalate it and you're right, Maya met his gaze steadily. Then people die, Derek. Potentially a lot of people. The weight of that statement hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Derek returned to his desk and spent several minutes reviewing Maya's analysis, occasionally asking technical questions that demonstrated he was finally taking her seriously. I'll need to brief the director personally, Derek said finally. This kind of threat assessment requires immediate attention at the highest levels. When? This afternoon. Can you prepare a presentation version of this analysis? Something that can be understood by people who aren't technical experts? Maya nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. After years of being dismissed, someone was finally listening. But she also knew that escalating a threat of this magnitude would put her under intense scrutiny. If she was wrong, her career in federal service would be over. If she was right, she might have just prevented one of the most devastating cyber attacks in American history. As Maya returned to her cubicle to prepare the most important presentation of her career, she caught sight of her reflection in her monitor's black screen. The woman looking back at her appeared tired but determined. Someone who had finally found her voice in a world that had spent years trying to silence it. The director's conference room on the 7th floor felt like a different world from Maya's 3rd-floor cubicle. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the National Mall, where tourists moved like ants between the monuments that defined American democracy. The mahogany table could seat 20 people, though only 6 were present for what Derek had cryptically described as an urgent threat briefing. Maya sat at the far end of the table, her laptop open and her hands slightly trembling as she watched the most powerful people she had ever been in a room with review her analysis. Director Patricia Williams, a former NSA deputy with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing, sat at the head of the table flanked by 2 deputy directors Maya recognized only from official photographs. Ms. Rodriguez, Director Williams began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected millions of lives. Your supervisor tells me you've identified what you believe to be a coordinated reconnaissance operation targeting our critical infrastructure. Yes, ma'am. Maya's voice was steadier than she felt. Based on 6 weeks of pattern analysis across multiple federal networks, I've identified systematic vulnerability mapping that appears to be preparation for a large-scale coordinated attack. Deputy Director Marcus Thompson, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses not unlike Maya's own, leaned forward. Walk us through your methodology. How did you identify these patterns when our automated systems didn't flag them? Maya had prepared for this question. She pulled up her first visualization on the room's large display screen. The individual intrusions were designed to stay below standard detection thresholds. Each one lasted exactly 4.7 seconds and occurred on 72-hour intervals across different time zones. Separately, they looked like routine network noise. Together, they form a comprehensive mapping operation. For the next 20 minutes, Maya presented her findings with the clarity and precision that had made her a respected analyst among those who actually worked with data. She showed network logs, correlation maps, timing analyses, and vulnerability assessments that painted a picture of meticulous preparation for cyber warfare. Director Williams asked pointed questions that demonstrated both her technical background and her understanding of national security implications. Unlike Derek's dismissive responses, these were the questions of someone who understood that Maya's analysis could be either a career-ending false alarm or intelligence that could prevent a national catastrophe. "Assuming your analysis is correct," Director Williams said after Maya finished her presentation, "what's your assessment of the timeline? When would such an attack likely occur?" Maya had spent considerable time on this question. "Based on the progression of the reconnaissance patterns, I estimate they're in the final mapping phase. If I were planning this operation, I would execute within 2 to 3 weeks, during a period of maximum impact and minimum response capability, such as a major holiday weekend or during a significant national event when emergency response resources are stretched thin and media attention is focused elsewhere." Deputy Director Sarah Chen, who had been silent throughout the presentation, finally spoke. "Ms. Rodriguez, you've been with DHS for 8 years. Why haven't we seen analysis of this caliber from you before?" The question stung, but Maya had expected it. "With respect, ma'am, I've been producing analyses like this regularly. This is just the first time anyone at this level has looked at them." An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Derek shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the implication that his department had been overlooking critical intelligence. Director Williams broke the silence. "What do you recommend as our next steps?" Maya had prepared for this question too, though she knew her answer would be controversial. "We need to coordinate with NSA, FBI, and potentially the military's cyber command. This threat crosses all jurisdictional boundaries. We also need to alert critical infrastructure operators without causing panic." "That's a significant escalation based on pattern analysis," Deputy Director Thompson observed. The political implications of being wrong are manageable," Maya interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. "The implications of being right and doing nothing are not." Director Williams studied Maya for a long moment, then turned to Derek. "I want this analysis verified by our best technical teams within 6 hours. If they confirm Ms. Rodriguez's findings, we escalate immediately to the National Security Council." As the meeting concluded, Maya felt both vindicated and terrified. She had finally been heard, but now the weight of her discovery pressed down on her like a physical force. If she was wrong, she would become a cautionary tale about analysts who saw threats in shadows. If she was right, the next few days would determine whether her warning came in time. The verification process was intense. Maya spent the afternoon working alongside the department's most senior analysts, walking them through her methodology and defending every correlation she had identified. Dr. James Mitchell, the department's chief technical officer, initially approached her findings with skepticism, but gradually became an advocate as he verified her data independently. "This is extraordinary work," Dr. Mitchell told her, as they reviewed the final verification report. "Your pattern recognition capabilities are unlike anything I've seen in 20 years of intelligence analysis." By 6 p.m., Maya's analysis had been confirmed by 3 independent teams. The threat was real, the timeline was accurate, and the potential impact was catastrophic. Director Williams convened an emergency meeting with senior officials from multiple agencies, and Maya found herself briefing deputy directors from NSA, FBI, and Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. The next 48 hours blurred together in a series of briefings, strategy sessions, and coordination meetings. Maya barely left the federal building, sleeping on a couch in an unused office and surviving on vending machine food and government coffee. She watched as her analysis triggered the largest coordinated cybersecurity response in American history. Federal agents contacted critical infrastructure operators across the country. Power companies implemented additional security protocols. Transportation networks increased monitoring of their control systems. Financial institutions activated emergency response procedures, all based on patterns that Maya had identified while working alone in her cubicle. On the 3rd day after her briefing to Director Williams, Maya was working in a temporary office assigned to the crisis response team when Derek appeared in her doorway with an expression she had never seen before, something between respect and awe. "Maya, they found it," he said quietly. NSA intercepted communications confirming a coordinated attack plan for this weekend. Multiple cells, synchronized timing, exactly as you predicted. Maya felt her knees weaken. Being right had never felt so terrifying. The president has been briefed, Derek continued. There's going to be a ceremony next week. Maya, you just prevented what could have been the most devastating attack on American infrastructure in our history. As Derek left, Maya stared out the window at the Washington Monument, its peak barely visible through the evening haze. Somewhere in the city, federal agents were executing operations based on her analysis. Somewhere else, would-be attackers were discovering that their carefully planned operation had been compromised by a data analyst they had never heard of. For the first time in years, Maya Rodriguez felt truly seen. 3 weeks had passed since the coordinated cyber attack was thwarted, and Maya's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The woman who had once eaten lunch alone at her desk was now fielding calls from news outlets, think tanks, and universities. Her cubicle had been replaced with a corner office, and her title had changed from senior data analyst to principal cyber threat specialist, a position created specifically to recognize her unique capabilities. But despite the professional accolades and salary increase, Maya still felt like an outsider in many ways. The same colleagues who had ignored her for years now sought her opinions on everything from network security protocols to weekend plans. The attention felt hollow, like recognition that came too late and for the wrong reasons. Maya was reviewing threat assessments in her new office when Derek knocked on her door, something that would have been unthinkable just a month earlier. His demeanor had completely changed since the crisis. Gone was the patronizing tone, replaced by genuine respect and something that looked like guilt. Maya, I have some news, Derek said, settling into the chair across from her desk. Director Williams wants to see you in her office. There's someone there who wants to meet you. Another interview? Maya asked, not looking up from her computer screen. She had grown tired of explaining her analysis to journalists who seemed more interested in the dramatic narrative than the technical details that had made her discovery possible. Not exactly. Derek's smile suggested he knew something Maya didn't. You should probably head up there now. 7th floor, director's office. Maya saved her work and took the elevator up, wondering what new bureaucratic formality awaited her. The 7th floor felt different today, more activity than usual, with security personnel she didn't recognize stationed at various points along the corridor. She noticed several men in dark suits with earpieces, their eyes constantly scanning the environment with professional alertness. Director Williams' secretary, Mrs. Patterson, greeted Maya with an unusually bright smile. Ms. Rodriguez, please go right in. The director is waiting for you. Maya knocked and entered the familiar conference room where she had first presented her analysis. Director Williams stood near the windows, but she wasn't alone. A tall man in a navy suit stood with his back to the door, looking out at the National Mall. When he turned around, Maya's breath caught in her throat. President Michael Harrison looked exactly as he did on television, but somehow more substantial in person. His presence filled the room with an authority that transcended politics. This was a man accustomed to making decisions that shaped history. Miss Rodriguez, President Harrison said, extending his hand with a warm smile. I've been looking forward to meeting the woman who saved our nation's infrastructure. Maya shook his hand, momentarily speechless. She had known this meeting might happen. Director Williams had mentioned the possibility, but standing face to face with the president felt surreal. Mr. President, Maya managed, finding her voice. It's an honor to meet you, sir. The honor is mine, President Harrison replied, gesturing for Maya to sit at the conference table. I've read your analysis multiple times. The level of detail, the pattern recognition, the foresight to see what others missed. It's extraordinary work. Director Williams joined them at the table, carrying a folder with an official seal. Mr. President, as we discussed, Ms. Rodriguez identified and analyzed a threat that our standard systems completely missed. Her work prevented what intelligence agencies estimate could have been the most devastating cyber attack in American history. President Harrison nodded gravely. The briefings I received painted a sobering picture. Coordinated attacks on power grids, transportation networks, financial systems, the cascading failures could have affected millions of Americans. "That was our assessment as well, sir," Maya replied, still struggling to believe she was having this conversation with the President of the United States. The attackers had mapped vulnerabilities across multiple critical systems. If executed simultaneously, the damage would have been catastrophic. "Maya," President Harrison said, leaning forward slightly, "I understand that your colleagues didn't initially take your concerns seriously. That must have been frustrating." Maya felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she had experienced countless times when her analysis was dismissed or overlooked. "It was challenging, sir, but the important thing is that the threat was ultimately recognized and addressed." "Gracious and professional," President Harrison observed with a slight smile. "But I think it's important to acknowledge that you persisted despite being underestimated. That takes courage, especially in an environment where conformity is often valued over independent thinking." The president stood and walked to Director Williams, who handed him the folder she had been carrying. "Maya, I'm here today because your country owes you a debt of gratitude that can never be fully repaid. Your vigilance, your expertise, and your determination to speak truth regardless of the consequences. These are the qualities that keep America safe." President Harrison opened the folder and removed a medal suspended from a blue ribbon with white stars. Maya recognized it immediately as the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. "Maya Rodriguez," President Harrison said formally, "by the authority vested in me as President of the United States, I present you with the Presidential Medal of Freedom in recognition of your exceptional service to our nation and your role in preventing a catastrophic attack on American infrastructure." Maya stood as President Harrison approached, her heart pounding as he placed the medal around her neck. The weight of it seemed to represent not just this moment, but all the years of being overlooked, all the analysis that had been dismissed, all the late nights spent protecting a country that had barely known she existed. "Thank you, Mr. President," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. I never imagined." "Maya," President Harrison said gently, "I want you to know that your work didn't just prevent an attack. It revealed gaps in our security infrastructure that we're now addressing. Your analysis has already led to improvements in how we monitor and protect our critical systems." As the ceremony concluded and official photographers captured the moment, Maya felt a profound sense of completion, not because she needed recognition to validate her work, but because her dedication had finally been acknowledged by the person whose job it was to protect all Americans. Later that afternoon, Maya returned to her office to find it filled with flowers, cards, and colleagues who suddenly wanted to congratulate her. But the moment that meant the most came when she noticed a handwritten note on her desk from the cleaning crew, the same people who had worked around her during all those late nights when she was chasing patterns in the digital darkness. "Ms. Rodriguez," the note read, "we always knew you were doing important work. Thank you for keeping us safe." The evening cleaning crew. Maya smiled as she pinned the Presidential Medal of Freedom to her office wall, right next to a photo of her parents who had immigrated to America so their daughter could have opportunities they never had. Tomorrow she would return to analyzing threats and protecting systems, but now she would do so knowing that her voice had been heard at the highest levels of government. Sometimes, the most important recognition comes not from those who celebrate your success, but from those who witnessed your dedication when no one else was watching.